Good afternoon, everybody. Brad Hesselberg, founder and owner of the Market Forge Sword and Shield Solutions. Today, I want to talk about diversification and how it's not protection, it's actually a trade-off. But before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that I am a licensed financial advisor. You can look up my link in the description. I'll be sure to put that there. But this is not financial advice. It's never financial advice because I am not your advisor. This is simply for educational and entertainment purposes only. So let's go ahead and kick into it. So look, diversification is one of those ideas that everybody pretty much universally agrees with. It's taught early and it is repeated constantly. And because of that, it's rarely questioned. If you have an advisor, if you're in financial services, man, diversification is on the tip of everybody's tongue, and it's you pretty much brought up as a bonus, to any strategy. And that doesn't mean that it's not, but I think it's important to have context when we talk about any of these things, including diversification. So just to be clear, diversification doesn't eliminate risk. It changes what risks you're taking. Okay. So when most people hear risk, they think volatility. So if we have a very diversified portfolio, do we lower the volatility? You bet. You'll lower the volatility, but volatility is not risk. You need volatility in markets in order to perform the way your assets want to. Volatility simply suggests how aggressively it's moving in one direction or the other. That's it. Like you need volatility. It's important. Um, what's more important is to be on the right side of it, right? So diversification tries to smooth all that out to avoid some of that volatility. So risk is actually permanent loss or forced selling, to where we actually take a loss on our position by selling, or potentially missed opportunities. The reason why diversification feels safe is it reduces emotional pain, right? So you don't see those big swings to the downside, which tends to draw more emotion out of people than to the upside. But it goes both ways. That means that you don't see those aggressive moves to the upside because you're diversified across all sorts of different assets. And it makes it easier for portfolios to sit with clients. And that's why you've seen it become such a widespread ideology amongst advisors. It keeps people from panicking. Okay. This is on purpose. It's why the industry loves to talk about diversification. It protects relationships as much as portfolios. Because if people aren't panicking, if people aren't getting worked up, then they're more likely to just continue to go along with the way that things are going on. But there's trade-offs to all of this. Okay? If you're fine with your portfolio just, doing average every single year, then yeah, maybe it makes sense. But keep in mind, when we got into 2022, the 60/40 portfolio, one of the most diversified strategies that is pitched in financial services, did very, very poorly because they were holding 40% bonds, 60% equities. Didn't matter what equities you were holding, you were going to get punished. And the bonds got punished on top of it. Okay, so that's why I think this is such a relevant conversation, because even if you're heavily diversified and you minimize volatility, if everything in your basket of stocks is going down, what does it matter? Um, so really kind of clarifies that is more positions mean less regret if you're wrong. And that's easy for an advisor to get behind if they just have you highly diversified across a lot of different strategies. If they're wrong, it doesn't really matter because you're just you hold so many different things that the ones that were wrong doesn't matter. It kind of smooths it out. But also means less reward if you were right. So, for instance, the last couple of years, you've seen AI do incredibly well. Okay, so if anybody had a well diversified portfolio, the part that was tied to AI, tech, and large cap stocks, those did well. But if you were holding small cap, mid cap, those underperformed. If you're holding energy, those have underperformed. There's a lot of sectors that have underperformed. Okay, so that means that a chunk of your portfolio did well, but the rest of it didn't. Um, it just reduces regret, not risk. And regret, can be both ways. Hey, I wish I would have bought more of that, or I wish I would have bought less of that. Broad exposure avoids catastrophic failure, and that's why diversification is talked about as regularly as it does, because the idea is to get clients into strategies and get them to stay there, right? So catastrophic failure would get people pulling their funds very, very quickly. And so that's good, right? We don't want catastrophic failure. Um, but it also caps outside success. Okay, your portfolio is going to be minimized if you're overly diversified across 20 different sectors. And trust me, I see it. Like I work in this every single day, and I see these portfolios over and over and over again, where they own everything. It's unbelievably broad. They avoid catastrophe, but you don't see big returns typically. You don't outperform by being average, I think is a really good way of putting it. Everybody's doing the same thing. At least that's what it feels like when I'm analyzing people's accounts. A lot of people are just doing the same thing. It's average. If you do average things, you're gonna get average return. If that's okay, then that's fine. It's a good fit for you. But if you're looking for outsized returns, diversification might not necessarily be the right way to go about it. But we'll kind of keep talking about that though. Highly diversified portfolios, they feel like set it and forget it. And again, that's why big institutions like these ideas. Right? People come in and they create this highly diversified portfolio, and we're just going to hold that thing for 30 years. That's how they go about doing it a lot of times. It often leads to disengagement. So if you're out there and you've got an advisor and you haven't heard from them in some time, don't assume that they're doing rebalancing. Don't assume that they're buying and selling anything, because there's probably a decent probability that they're not. And your portfolio looks similar to it did the day that you walked in. And it's easy for advisors to disengage when it's set up that way. When everything matters a little, nothing matters enough. Think about that. If you own a little bit of everything, then your portfolio is going to be average. Some years will be good, some years will be bad. Different assets will be good, different assets will be bad. If you're truly investing and your goal is to really grow your assets, there's a better way to go about it than just buying a little bit of everything and sitting on it, in my opinion. Diversification works well in normal markets. Okay. I think a lot of people, were investing after 08, in the 09, 2010 range. And we basically had a raging bull market for what seemed like 10 plus years. So these ideologies really stuck during those times. Well, we got to keep in mind that there was a lot of money being created during those times. So those were considered normal markets. And these portfolios perform well during that, because not everything, but a lot of stuff was going up. You could throw a dartboard at a wall or at a newspaper and find tickers and go with it, or buy ETFs and mutual funds, and most of them are doing well. But things are changing, and I hope that people are seeing that, and I think that's why this conversation is as relevant as ever, because stress is where things change. I don't know about you guys, but things feel different in the last 5 years. Going into the 2020s, things are different. You've had real tightening cycles. You've had real shifts in markets. You've had real downside opportunities. 2020, 2022 are two standout years, and things definitely feel different. And in those sorts of environments, it's important to understand what you hold. Like correlations rise, liquidity disappears, everyone leaves together. Okay, so you might be very well diversified, but the fact is you just own assets. And if liquidity is leaving the market, everything's going to go down, except for a handful of things. There'll be a few things that maybe are a small fraction of your diversified portfolio, but most of it's going to go down. It's all going to go in the same direction. just like it did from 2009 to 2019, 2020. They'll move together. Crisis doesn't care what label you put on an asset. If there's crisis, assets are going to go down, regardless of how diversified you are. Real protection isn't owning more things, because that's basically what diversification breaks down into. You just hold a lot. You hold a little bit of a lot of stuff, but it doesn't care. Crisis doesn't care in those situations. What's important is to actually understand what you own. That's the key difference. If you own a little bit of a lot of different things, my guess is you probably don't have real conviction in your portfolio, and you probably don't know necessarily what you own. The questions that I like to raise when I'm looking at these things is, what risk am I accepting? Well, if I don't know what I'm holding, how do I know what risk I'm taking on? What risk am I avoiding? Okay, so I think we can answer that with, well, I'm avoiding potentially huge swings to the downside, but I'm also not taking advantage of huge swings to the upside. Okay, we want those outsized returns if we can. And we get those by having real conviction, real understanding in what we're holding. If you look at institutions in general, or investors in general, if you pay attention, if you understand what's going on, you have the opportunity to have conviction and potentially outsized returns. Look, it was relatively, in hindsight, you look back when AI really started taking off. If you just focused on the Magnificent Seven and held those positions, you'd be a heck of a lot better off just dollar cost averaging into something like that, as opposed to being heavily diversified across numerous strategies. Like, that's the difference. Understanding what you're holding and where you are with regards to market timing, cycles, business cycles. Those things are all things that can be identified. Institutions do it all the time. Awareness beats allocation. Be aware of what you're holding. Be aware of why you hold it. Have conviction in what you're buying, and if you're paying close attention to it, you keep your winners, you cut your losers. Like, diversification is a tool, and it can be a very powerful tool, but it's not a shield. If the explanation to any of your questions is, oh well, we're diversified, don't worry about it, that's not a good enough response, in my opinion. It's not a substitute for thinking. Understand what you're holding, understand where you're at, and just have conviction or confidence or understanding of why you own them and how they're going to benefit you. Real protection comes from understanding risk, not simply hiding from it. Well, I hope this was informational for everybody and educational. If you're in a situation where you're looking for a second opinion or you need a financial advisor, I have a link in the description below. Feel free to take a look at that. And as always, like and subscribe. Certainly helps grow the channel. And then I also developed a free PDF, which I put together based off the way that I look at markets, so it can help you understand the way that I think, how I identify different opportunities. Feel free to download that. If you have any questions, drop a post in the comment, and we'll see you next time. Take care.